If you optimize poorly, you've already lost. Today I'm going to show you what someone asked me under my latest video about the expert we're building here on YouTube. Someone asked me if I could try to optimize it since they had gotten good results on some long tests. That's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to optimize the educational expert that we've created here step by step. Have you seen it grow? Video after video, this expert. You'll see how I think through 4 years of testing, how I choose the input parameters, and how I then test it over the last 3 months. Out of sample. Welcome everyone, I'm Andrea, your automated trader, and if you like what I do, leave a nice like. On the video, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos I'll be posting. So this is our usual expert. Now I'll show you the code in case someone hasn't copied it yet. So let's start from the beginning. Here we have all the code. I'll go slowly. We have the first part with the inputs, then the global variables, and we have our own init function. And then the whole part that's in OnTick, which is everything we've developed in the previous videos of this series. So here you have a little recap. Let's go all the way to the end. Slowly, if anyone needs to copy it like this, you can copy the code and you'll have the expert. Okay, the expert ends here. It's about 300 lines of code. So in the meantime, let's just run a test in OHLC with the basic settings we had set up and see, as we saw last time, that the expert performed quite well over a long period. Clearly, this isn't a great equity curve because it did well for a good period, then lost a lot and recovered a bit. We need to try to see if we can find better parameters. How do you do that? But I don't work all the way up to the last day. I leave myself a few months, maybe 3 months, to be able to run a test. Then in the end, I check in out of sample to see if the set of parameters I found still holds up. Did it hold up or did it collapse? So was it all just overfitting, right? Here, let's set it up to November, so we have a period we can use for testing. I leave it in OHLC mode so the calculations are faster, since I know it's not completely accurate anyway. But the result is about what will come out in real tick as well. And then I have to go and choose my input parameters. So for now, let's not touch the trading hours. Let's let it trade pretty much all the time, except we remove just the period from 11 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. because that's when the spreads are widest. There's little volatility, so we remove these hours. We should aim to maintain a risk percentage of exactly 1% per trade. So we can also leave the fixed lot size and set 1% per trade. We'll keep it on H1 for now since we started with this logic on H1, so let's leave it on H1. Let's go here and set the algorithm to genetic based, which is the fastest and works best for this initial general optimization. So let's vary the periods of the moving average. How can we reasonably vary the moving average? I mean, here it suggests 201 to 2000, which obviously isn't right, is it? I can't vary a moving average with a step of 1, that's too fine, so maybe I'll set it from 10. The first one with a step of 10 up to 250, so that I cover a range of moving averages. More than 250 does not really make sense. No, we can even go up to 300. Let's set it to 300. Then we have the type of moving average. Here we can vary the types. Let's try all the types that MetaTrader offers us. The second moving average, the faster one, here as well. Let's maybe start from 10 with a step of 10 and go up to 150. It needs to be a fast moving average. Here too, we vary, then the type of moving average, we leave those as variables. The RSI, obviously we use it on H1 because we're working entirely on H1. Can we vary the periods? Yes, let's try, maybe without changing them too much. Let's start with 10. 4 and 14, then maybe let's do 18. So we have 3 steps, 10, 14, and 18, values similar to the classic 14. And then we'll see what comes out of it. Here too, we have the RSI sell and RSI buy. We had 70 and 30, maybe we can do 65. With a step of 5 up to 75. We should probably do the exact same thing for the buy side as well. Maybe let's go ahead and set those specific values to 25, then 5, and finally 35 as well. Then we have the stop loss and the target. We want to vary those as well, obviously, right? In our tests, we had used 0, 3, and 2. We could do, I don't know, maybe a stop loss of 0.2, a step of 0.1, and maybe up to 0.5 because that makes sense, right? A 0.5 stop loss on euro dollar is already pretty big, and the same goes for the target. If we had two, maybe we start from one. With a step of 0.2 and go up to 3. Maybe we do 0.25, so we have a few less, just to get a first approximation. Enable, disable. The break-even point is the same as before. Now let's try giving it some specific values to work with. We can start from 0.3 or perhaps 0.4. Actually, let's go ahead and start from 0.4. Say it. From there, we will set a step size of exactly 0.2. And we'll continue this sequence all the way up to 1.6. This way, we also have a somewhat large value. And then the percentage at which we close at break even, we can start from 30 and go up by 10. Up to 70, so we start testing by closing at 30%, 40, 50, 60, and 70%. Trailing stop, obviously at this moment we're not using it since we're trying to use break even, so we use one or the other. And then we have the magic number. So as we did, we have a lot of combinations to test. Does it make sense to do this? It's likely that we'll end up with very overfitted conditions, right? But as a first approximation, let's try running the tests and see if anything positive comes out, at least from all these tests we're doing. After that, we'll take a look at which direction our expert is moving in and filter things a bit, because it doesn't make sense to do all these combinations. You can see that even here, we don't have any major positive results, so almost everything is red, so this optimization isn't going particularly well. No, we have very few green results and everything else is red. Even in the optimizations here, in the results, yes, there are some good ones, some bad ones, but it's nothing special. Let's let the test run anyway. So now we have a few results. We can stop and try to understand what's happening. In the meantime, we see that the first average, all the initial results are around 100 mainly. So we can then go and narrow down a bit the range of data we're using for the average. Whereas the second average, all the values are below 100, so we already know that there we can reduce, so go below or above 100. It doesn't yield good results, because with these initial data, we don't have anything interesting. No, the RSI varies a bit everywhere, so we can also leave it as we're doing now. Same thing for the two RSI trigger parameters. These are also varying, but they don't change much, they're a bit variable, so what we're doing is fine. The stop loss. We see that we can go from 0.2 up to a maximum of 0.5, because those are all the values. The first ones are all in that range, right? Another thing we've noticed is that we need large targets, and here all the values above 1.5 are all, in any case, large values. So even the stop loss, the target as well. Let's set it within this range of values. Break even. What we're doing is fine. It's interesting because we have a distribution here of values that are a bit mixed, so that could work. Let's look at some results just to see if what we're doing makes any sense or not. For example, let's take this one. I don't necessarily have to pick the best one. I'd go with this one here because it has a good profit factor, right? It has a good profit result, 1.92. Let's see what happens if we run it by double-clicking and checking how the chart looks. Here. We can already see that it's not an interesting equity because we have all these steps, so it's something that moves in steps. It's not ideal if you take a bunch of stops and then one good trade pushes everything up. So this is a somewhat risky equity. I'm not really a fan of it. Let's try another one. This one is already more interesting. It already looks more like a real equity curve. It has moments when it goes up and moments when it goes down. But everything is more balanced, and it's not based on just a few trades that go really well. Let's now see how this trade would have performed up to today. Hi. You see that this equity curve is quite interesting, right? because after the period we tested, it still performed well. It kept rising up to today. It didn't crash. So this means that the bias we're following with these parameters is something that has held up over time, even after we optimized. And this is an important signal for us, right? Because we don't want something that works well in testing and then performs badly in reality. So what's the next step now? Well, this is definitely an equity curve I can use as a reference, right? So these are the data. I can use these as a reference point to start and continue developing my expert. So what do I do now in general? So I go and do an optimization of this kind. I start varying the parameters around here. So here I had the moving average that needs to be 100, the other 200. So maybe I set it to 80 with a step of 5. And I go up to 120. This way I move around this average. I keep the type of average fixed. Otherwise, obviously everything changes, right? So the other average as well. I had 20, I can do 10, 5, 30. This way I can see if there's a slightly better setting compared to the one I used before. We'll leave the RSI as is. Maybe we have 10. Yes, we can do as before. Let's leave those 3 steps in the RSI as well. Same thing here. We can still let them vary since they were already only changing by 3 steps. So I do not have much else. Then there is the stop loss, which I had at 0.4. So even in this case, maybe I can set it from 0.3 to 0.5. I'll narrow it down a bit, right? And same thing for the target. It doesn't make sense to start from 1 because the good results started from 2.25. In this case, maybe I'll do 1.75 to 2.50 so that I narrow the range, right? The break-even was active here, so we'll only do combinations with the break-even active. I had 1 and 2. I can start from 1 and go up to 1.6, 1.4. Let's set it at 1.4 so we don't have too many attempts. The percentage I close at was 40. Here too, I can maybe start from 30 and go up to 50. So I'm close to those values. Clearly, as you can see, we've greatly reduced the number of combinations. So we ran a general test just to understand the range of parameters we needed to use. Then we found some parameters that seemed good and we started working in that area. There. So now that we've set all our input parameters, let's remember to go and change the date. Let's set it back to 2025-11 so that we leave ourselves the last 3 months as out of sample, and let's go ahead and run our test. So let's start. And from here, of course, you go on to analyze your data. Even visually, you can already see that the test is different from before because we have many more green dots compared to what we had initially. So yes, of course, there are negative combinations, but we also have more positive ones. Here too, you can see the results are better because I have a lot of them. Green ones, even if you sort by profit. Anyway, there are many that are green. Now let's let the test run for a bit, and then I'll stop it. After all, this is just to explain the logic to you. Then you have the option to continue, run all the tests, change the parameters, evaluate, and make your own choices. Maybe you'll find some good settings for the expert. Write it in the comments so we can take a look, and maybe I'll test them myself and give you my opinion on what you've done. Anyway, just visually, you can see how many green combinations there are in this area. Now let's maybe run 1,000 tests just to get some data, and then we'll analyze the results. Obviously, if you want to do a serious optimization, you should run the entire test and not stop at 1,000. I'm stopping it now just for the sake of the video and to explain what I would have done. You can see that the longer the test runs, the better combinations it finds, because that's exactly what the genetic algorithm does. It selects to reduce the number of calculations you have to do. One thing I do when I run these tests, I always use the MetaTrader cloud for these tests. And yes, I do end up spending a few euros, because for a test like this, I might spend 2, 3, or 5 euros, but I get it done very quickly. On the other hand, if I had to do it on my computer without using the cloud, it might take me 2 hours or an hour. And I prefer to pay a few euros and save time so I can work on other things. So let's pause for a moment. Let's take a look at our results. For example, in this case, it is not necessarily true that you have to pick this one, which is the most profitable with 12,000. Here it's clear. We started with 10,000 at the beginning of the test, and this one earns enough to double your account. Of course, it's not a given that I have to pick this one. Maybe I'll test it, look at it, I don't like it, and I choose this one instead because it has a lower drawdown. So maybe I prefer this one because I say, yes, it earns a bit less, but it also has a lower drawdown. Then, another important thing, you also need to look at how many trading operations you make during the period. Like here, in 4 years, 250 trades. Yes, that makes sense because it's more than one per week. If you had done 30 trades, it's clear that I can't pick this set. I would discard it because it's too limited. I can't do 30 trades in 4 years, right? I'd become an expert who basically never works. And the data wouldn't be meaningful either. So let's try the first one and see what happens. Let's go into the settings, set the date to today again, and take a look. You can see that this equity also went up, then came back down, and in the last period it dropped a bit. But then it recovered, so we can also take it into consideration. Let's try this one, maybe with little drawdown. Of course, choosing the right equity is a personal choice, right? There are people who prefer the one that has earned the most, and others who might prefer one with less drawdown. There, you make your own choices and pick the one you want. Then, of course, after this whole process, you might go and try the expert for a month or two in demo mode and see what happens if you like it, how it works. Then obviously, in the end, you can also put it on a real account and give it a try, maybe with low risk. And you keep going. And you run your whole series of tests until you decide how your expert should work. This one is much more similar to the first one we saw. It started off, and in the most recent period, it has performed very well. I usually prefer to pick the ones that have done well in the most recent period rather than those that have simply made more profit, maybe even more. Because that means they've adapted better to the current market. Of course, they also need to have performed well in the past. I can't have an equity curve that was terrible in the past and is only good today, otherwise it's not very robust, right? So the lesson from this video is kind of this. Optimizing doesn't mean finding some magic numbers. Optimizing means choosing sensible input parameters, so meaningful ones, trying to avoid overfitting, and checking out of sample, so in auto sample, what happens to your equity. Remember that if you have a beautiful equity curve in the backtest, but it's pretty bad in the auto sample period, that's a parameter that should set off a warning bell for you. You need to be careful because it can be normal. Maybe it just didn't perform well during that period. However, the expert could also be a sign of overfitting. So be careful. Test it in demo mode and with low risk. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell.